Okay. All right, everybody. Hello and welcome to our first Des Moines Marketo User Group. This is our first one, so bear with us if we encounter any technical difficulties. My name is Reagan. I am the leader here. And if you have any questions about the Des Moines User Group in the future, you can feel free to contact me. I would love it if you are not already a Marketo user group of the Des Moines area to join. I guess we can get started here.
All right.
So I just want to inform everybody that this meeting is being recorded. If you do not wish to participate live, you can end your session and you can watch it later on the YouTube channel, or I can send you the session. Here is a reminder for Adobe Summit. I wanted to offer up, we do have a $200 discount code for Summit. If you have not already purchased your ticket, let me know and I can send that over to you as well. But that is March 19th through the 23rd, and we will be there. So if you'd like to meet in person, we'd be happy to connect with other Mugs users. So getting into what we are talking about today, we're talking about Marketo subscription centers and best practices. If you want to go to the next slide, I will do some introductions of our team here. So my name is Reagan. I am the leader for the Des Moines Mugs group. Brandon, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, I'm Brandon Schulte. I'm a VP of Marketing Technology here at Xeris. Been a long time user of Marketo as well as other MarTech platforms. So excited to be part of the user group and presenting here a little bit later.
Georgia?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Georgia Porter. I am a solutions consultant here at Xeris. So working with a lot of clients, helping them with their Marketo implementations and getting them started and ramped up and ready to go and use their systems. So we'll go ahead and get started. I'll be giving the majority of the presentation today about subscription centers. I'll also be kind of pinging over to Brandon a little bit to talk about some compliance. But the purpose today is to understand, one, why do you need a preference center? And then once you're in Marketo, how do you build it? So kind of getting into the nuts and bolts of all of the little pieces that you need. So to start, what is a preference center? And so a lot of people will say it's just a place where subscribers get to decide what types of messages they can receive. You've probably seen hundreds of different examples, and usually they range in an opt-in mindset or an opt-out mindset. So this one we see here on the screen is mostly an opt-out mindset. It gives them the ability to opt out of a variety of different categories, as well as unsubscribing globally from any emails. And then why do you need one? So a couple key points, mostly formulating your communication strategy. So it helps to understand what your users in your system are interested in. So maybe you have event emails, you have marketing emails, promotional emails. Maybe someone's truly only interested in coming to your events. You're going to reduce your opt-out rate if you target those messages to your users and kind of function on what they are truly looking for. The other point is ensuring the compliance. So I'm sure you've all heard all the legal talk. It's growing. United States is a little behind, I think, some of the other countries. So I think most of our clients have been pretty lucky. They can function with an opt-out structure where they just allow people to unsubscribe from their emails. But a lot of European and Canadian areas and clients, they need that opt-in mindset, which Brandon will talk a little bit more about. So I'll hand it over to Brandon if you want to hit on some of those preferences and opt-in compliance.
Yeah, thanks, Georgia. So when I think of consent and preferences, it's really the best practices in terms of managing your relationship with your customers. So best practice is to put customers in control and really give them that transparency to let them opt in and opt out of what they want to receive. You can do this a couple different ways. I see people do it on a form when they initially capture the lead or the form fill. Also, same thing like when you meet somebody, your salespeople meet somebody at a trade show or an event or a webinar, being able to capture that consent up front is best. As Georgia said, that's really important when you're working with somebody with GDPR in the European Union, Castle in Canada, and then there's a variety of other countries that have different needs as they go through the process. But generally, best practice would be if you can capture consent up front, do. It's always going to put you in a good place. I used to work at a company that, we sent about 70 million emails per year globally. We started the opt-in process probably a couple years before GDPR went live, which I believe was like in 2018, so maybe 2016. We had millions of people in our database that weren't opted in. So we had to go through a process legally to basically grandfather people in from low risk jurisdictions like the United States. And then we basically had to start over from some of the higher risk jurisdictions. So I would say, as a matter of best practice, do that with either a checkbox on a form fill or basically something when you hit the submit button saying that, hey, if you by submitting this button, you agree to have your information stored and processed and leveraged for future communications. The other thing that's important with data and consent is really looking at the omni-channel piece. So obviously Marketo is a big piece of where you're going to have people coming in from. So whether it's a Marketo form embedded on your page, or as you start sending emails to your customers because you have them in Salesforce or another CRM platform or any other data source that you have. But thinking globally from a perspective of where do all my people come in from, what type of consent have I given, and then how am I able to store that across my ecosystem is really important. Marketo has some really good things to be able to do that. There also are other tools on the market that really specialize in centralized consent and preference management that you can look at as well. The third thing to look at is how do you increase subscribers? So how do you capture more consent? I've been at companies where, when you have an opt-in checkbox, maybe it's like a 30% an opt-in rate, whereas if you don't have that checkbox, everybody who submits a form, you're going to be more of a 100% opt-in rate. We have other places where they manually check the box. Now that differs by jurisdiction. I would definitely not suggest you do that with customers in the European Union, but in the United States and other places, you may get away with that. But do everything you can to create those subscribers. From there, then make sure you're governing consent across your different channels. So you may have salespeople reaching out to prospects, you may have marketing reaching out to prospects, you may have customer service engaging with prospects in different ways. Make sure that your ecosystem goes end to end. So when Georgia gets into the tactics of using Marketo, she'll show you kind of how you're syncing that field over from your CRM system, Salesforce, Dynamics, or any other platform, and then pushing that data both ways. So people can opt in or opt out at the email level when they talk to a salesperson, or maybe when they're even on your website, being able to adjust things. Last, make sure that you're managing your website and all the app technologies. Make sure there's not something hidden out there. I've been burned in the past because we had an opt-in or a data point where we were collecting information for people, and whether it was a sales team or marketing team was using that data and not realizing that it wasn't opt-in, and it got into a place where we had to lose those customers because we couldn't market to them. So be aware of what legal processes you need to do, and make sure you understand all your input points of where customers come into your system to make sure you have that valid opt-in consent. And then last but not least, obviously, focus on reporting and analyzing. So I'm sure most of you guys do this, when you check your email sends, whether you're using like the email performance report or other things, Marketo, seeing what your unsubscribe rate is, looking at your opt-in rate, if you do have an opt-in rate, to see what direction you're trending so you can really work on that personalization to increase your opt-in rate and hopefully reduce your unsubscribe rate. If you want to go to the next page. So why trust matters. Obviously, I think that customers have changed. If you ask most consumers, they're very guarded about how their data is used. And then when you look at companies, you may have a different concept, especially as marketers, like how you're using data versus how you would as a customer. So there's a lot of privacy legislation going on in the US right now. Unfortunately, it's a patchwork, unlike GDPR, where it was the 27 countries in Europe, Castle across Canada. You see a lot of things in the US on a state by state level, generally on the coasts. So California's kind of been a forefront of that. Virginia has a new law, Nevada has a law. There's a couple others that just are about ready to go into effect. So it's really a patchwork of how you go throughout the US. So I have some customers and some people that will look at that on a case-by-case basis. So maybe they'll treat California customers, for example, like European customers and collect consent, or they'll say take a blanket approach, like I'm going to take the same approach, whatever the most strict regulation is in the US, I'm going to take that across all my US consumers. So there are ways to do that on a Marketo differently, but really understanding the laws and how quickly they change is really important, especially in the US where there really are 50 plus different frameworks that are governing how you're supposed to use customer data and track consent. So as marketers, we've kind of seen, I've been a marketer for 20 plus years now, probably dating myself a little bit, but in terms of, how things have gone over time, if you go back, 15, 20 years ago, price and quality were the two biggest driver of whether a customer does business with you. As we've seen with kind of the digital transformation of the last 15, 20 years, obviously that customer experience, being able to engage me, being able to know me, and putting the right product in front of me at the right time has been much more important. What we think the next phase is going to go, and I think this kind of kicked off with GDPR a couple years ago, and I think is going to extend into the future, especially as you start seeing things like first-party cookies deprecated on major platforms like Google and Facebook and other places. You're going to see that trust and transparency is really important. Customers still expect you to know who they are and what they want to do, but they don't want to get stuff that hasn't been solicited. So really focusing on trust and transparency in addition to all those other criteria are really going to be important and really a differentiator in the market over the next 5-10 years as we continue to evolve and grow with compliance and trust. So a couple drivers that are seeing why this trust is so important. So the first thing is increased regulation. Every time, that's kind of one of the core principles I remember back from my MBA days. The political legal framework was always something very important when you're looking at a market and what you're doing with them. But you're seeing increased regulation. I think that's one of the few things that's bipartisan, at least in the U.S., that people can agree on is they don't like companies having customer data. So you're going to see more and more of this. That's one of the low-hanging fruits that a lot of states are really going to tackle over the coming years. The next thing that you see is really those technical challenges, and you guys see this more as marketers of just the tapestry of MarTech that you have. Whether that is, obviously Marketo is your marketing automation system, but you're seeing CRM systems, customer data platforms, analytics systems, sales enablement tools. You name event management, webinar management, you name it. There's all these platforms that have customer data, and they all need to be integrated in order to manage the customer lifecycle and drive business. So being able to understand all those input points and have synergy across the stack, which Marketo does a phenomenal job of, is definitely going to set you up for success. And then last but not least is kind of those consumer expectations. If you're like me, if you get a random email from someone that is wrong, or they misspell your name or do something where they're targeting you for something that you're clearly not interested in, that's a problem. So we should have always been doing that as marketers, but I think the level of consumer expectation has kind of risen with the Amazonification of America, right? Everybody expects every brand to understand you and present the right product and offerings, and that's just like the best of breed, like Amazon would do. So those three things really driving all the complexities within the trust and compliance market that we're seeing with Marketo and marketing automation today. So we've been talking, both internally at Xeris as well as our customers about are kind of these three keys to trust and transparency. So first and foremost, how am I capturing data on my customer? What type of consent or preferences am I doing? From there, then I'm taking it into my system and I'm governing it. So whether it's a hub and spoke system where I'm pushing everything to hopefully Marketo to manage that unsubscribe process, or if I have another third-party tool like OneTrust or one of those other compliance management tools that I'm using, how do I get from all those hubs to all the spokes into the hub, and then being able to understand that data and activating in real time. So I'm not pulling somebody into a smart list that hasn't opted into this product, or I'm not sending a message just for the sake of I'm gonna blast out a message to lots of people if it's gonna ultimately hurt me in the long run because they're gonna unsubscribe and not be interested in my brand. So I know I've been on the customer side in marketing where I've gone to my stakeholders for product A or product B, and they're like, who all can you pull me? I need to boost sales, so get as many emails out as possible. You guys all know as marketers that that's not the right way to manage customer journeys, especially if customer is interested in product A, B, C, D. If one of those product teams sends an email or something that turns them off and they unsubscribe globally, that's going to cause problems. So that's kind of why, as we get into subscription management with Georgia later, be thinking about those different areas. So I may be opted into product A, but not product B. I may be opted into my newsletter, but not my marketing. So just really giving the customer the opportunity to select the right level of communication that they see fit is ultimately going to be better for you long term as marketers, to make sure you're engaging those customers. So this is just kind of a visualization. So, think of it in terms of Marketo, where you're able to, capture the information on a form. You're able to subscribe them to a newsletter. Maybe they're visiting you on the mobile app. They're able to update their communication preferences, whether that is, opting into things or opting out of things. Talking to the contact center, just kind of that centralized approach. And as Georgia goes through kind of, how to action upon this in Marketo, think of all those different approaches and places that data comes into your customer, into your ecosystem with regard to customer consent and preferences, and how it gets to that centralized point. So it's updated, in real time or near real time. So you're not only compliant with laws, but you're doing the right thing by your customer, which is ultimately going to help you with that trust piece.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks, Brandon. Are there any questions before we get into the nuts and bolts of everything about compliance or anything about why we're here today? Silence is golden. All right. There is a raise hand option at the bottom of the screen, or if you want to drop anything in the chat today. Regan's here kind of managing that, so she'll be able to interrupt me, or if you want to interrupt me, that's fine as well. This is meant to be interactive, and we want to kind of network today and get to know your guys' use cases as well as we go over the general guidance. Okay, I'll go ahead and get into the subscription center pieces in Marketo. So a little bit on opt-in and opt-out again here. So opt-in, like we've seen, kind of using that checkbox. So if I go to the next slide, we've got two bigger examples here. So on the left, we have a checkbox at the bottom that says, I'd also like to be among one of the people that receives offerings. And then on the right-hand side, just using that blanketed paragraph approach. So kind of that legal paragraph at the bottom that says, by submitting this form, you are agreeing to receive our communications. So we'll go through both use cases today, how you have that actual checkbox and that actual opt-in versus just the blanket statement. All right, so for the opt-in mindset, first step, usually we have a Marketo custom Boolean field. So I'm going to walk through a little example here where we have a monthly newsletter. You're just going to opt into our monthly newsletter. I'm also going to hop back and forth between Marketo and the slides. We always feel like it's a little bit more interactive and you get to see some exposure into Marketo. If you don't know how to create a custom field or a smart list quite yet, that could be beneficial as well. So step 2 here is then to create a smart list. So this is an optional step. Sometimes you could just use that field in your email program. Maybe you want to say, give me all the people where they are opted into the monthly newsletter equals true. I've seen clients use the smart list approach if they want to add in any additional suppressions. So maybe you want to send your monthly newsletter out, but you have internal employees in your system, or you have some competitors in your system. So you can add to that global smart list and suppress those people there, and then just use the global smart list within your email program. So I'll hop into Marketo and kind of show those 2 first steps here. So we're in our sandbox instance where I can demo some of this stuff. In admin, we've got our field management. I already have my monthly newsletter field here. But if I was going to demonstrate creating a new one, I could say new custom field. We want it to be on our person. We want it to be able to type Boolean. So we can do that true, false. And then we could type in whatever we wanted here. Next, we're going to need that global smart list. So I'll go to the database. I'll go to my group smart lists. I've got some target lists built here. And this is my monthly newsletter subscribers. The other nice thing is with a smart list, you can name this whatever you want to name it. So I've added the word of subscribers here. Sometimes with your CRM, you might be restricted to specific naming conventions with the creation of those fields, and maybe the friendly label on that field didn't come over quite right. You could use a smart list that's a little bit friendlier for your marketing team functioning in those email programs. So if we go to the smart list, you can see I've drug in our field from the right-hand side here. I just searched for a monthly newsletter, drug it across, had it set to true. And so it's pulling all the people in the system that have opted in. Next couple steps here, step 3, we have building the preference center. So we usually do this with a default program with an operational channel. So you can kind of see that up here in the top. And then underneath that preference center program, we're going to need a form and a landing page to host that form. So on the form, we'll be able to add our opt-in field as well as our global unsubscribe field. So step 4 here talks a little bit about that. You need to make sure when you're creating any new type of opt-in or opt-out that you remember to add it to your preference center. So for most of our clients, we usually make some documentation about that of here are the 8 steps you need to do when you create a new newsletter. And it's similar to the steps I'm going through here with you today. So not only creating the opt-in so that you can send to that audience, but remembering to include it in all the places where people can update their communication styles. So I'll hop back to Marketo and we'll show in marketing activities here, I have my preference center program. And on the home page here, you can see I'm just using the operational channel. And then I created a new local asset, which is my preference center form. So I can go ahead and create a draft and we can take a look at the fields within here. So I added a couple little styling pieces at the top just to describe that we're managing our preferences. Added the email field as a required field. Some clients will pre-fill this based off of the email footer click. We always just like to make sure that it is a required field in case somebody organically comes to your landing page. We need to make sure that we're updating the preferences of the right person. Then I've added our opt-in field here. So that's our newsletter field. One handy little trick that we typically do is rather than using the field type of checkbox, we switch to checkboxes. This allows your label to go on the right-hand side of the checkbox, and then you can edit your values down here. So I've said subscribe to the monthly newsletter, and my stored value is yes. And this is kind of handy too because we've seen some clients rather than using a Boolean type for our opt-in where we just have true false, some clients like to use a string type where they utilize blank or true, false, maybe a lapsed subscriber. So you can use that string value with different options. So using checkboxes here lets me edit what the stored value is. If I don't want it to be yes, maybe I want it to be lapsed, I can edit that in here. Where with a checkbox, you just get that true false that matches your Boolean type. We'll get to my event example later for this field, but if we go down, we also have our global unsubscribed field here as well. And you'll see there's a little bit of graying out going on, so I have some visibility rules turned on for these fields. If we take a look at the visibility rules that are enabled, you can see I'm hiding my opt-in monthly newsletter field if unsubscribed is true. So this just kind of helps clean up your form. It's a good user experience. It helps making sure no one's opting in as they're globally opting out. That doesn't really make sense. And then we also are exposing this unsubscribed reason field. And I've got some different values in here that you can customize. So it's nice to gain some insight into why people are unsubscribing from your emails. So you could add a variety of drop-down options and only expose this field if global unsubscribed equals true. So that's a quick overview of the form. I'll go ahead and finish this. And then our landing page is pretty self-explanatory. It's simple. It only has the form, so I'm not going to edit it, but I will preview it with you here. So similar to what you saw in the slides, we just have a general styled form, got that little modern look, and you can see some of that visibility rules in action. So if I say unsubscribe from all, my opt-in, opt-out fields disappear, and now I have our unsubscribe reason. Okay, we hop back in here. We also need a footer snippet. So not only do you need to build your preference center with that landing page, but that link needs to be included in all of your email communications. So here's an example on the right of how you can include that. One trick that we've been seeing is including that email token in the footer in case you're doing any type of customer support, you get any complaints or requests about being unsubscribed, you know that that email was directly sent to a specific email address. And then you'll see I have both an unsubscribe link and a preference center link here. I'll get into that a little bit later. We can talk about a one-click unsubscribe functionality. But for right now, we'll kind of pretend that we're just using our manage preferences here link, which takes us out to that page I just previewed. And then step 6 is actually using that opt-in. So not only do we need it in our preference center, but we need to make sure that our monthly newsletter is set up correctly to target that direct audience. And another trick we've been doing is creating a default program channel called Parent Newsletter. So you're sending out those purple email programs every month. They're just a one-time send. Rather than just grouping them within a folder, you could group them within this default program, because then in your reporting, and for reporting purposes, we could do some program success reporting on how is the overall monthly newsletter doing this quarter or this year. So I'll hop in and show both of our footer snippet and our newsletter channel. So in Design Studio, I created a snippet down here at the bottom. This is our Xeris snippet, and it's just a little HTML chunk. So these can be handy if you want to make like a hot swap within your front-end email editor, if you want to add this to an email template. And if I make any changes to this, I can push the approval out to any assets that are using that snippet. So I've got our preference center linked in here, and that will appear at the bottom of our emails. So I'll hop out of that. Then I'll also show in admin, we created another channel. This is something that you just need to do one time. You set it up once and then it functions for you, but you can see I have parent newsletter here and it's applied to the default program, and we're measuring just members to being influenced. And we can define what that program success status is. So we could say, oh, if they click any link in our email, change their program status to influenced. We can define whether it's an open, a visit to the website after receiving an email. You can customize that after the fact. I'll go ahead and kind of jump ahead here. So then in marketing activities, we can go down, and I created our monthly newsletter default program with that new parent newsletter channel. And then underneath that default program, created some folder structure. So we've got our email sends, our local assets, and then some smart campaigns as well. And the first one is our purple email program here. So I call this our base send because the goal is you would just clone this base send every month, and this email sends folder would continue to grow. So our March newsletter is going to be under here, our April newsletter is going to be under here, and for reporting, we've kind of got a well-organized program. And if I go into our smart list, key point, we need to be hitting our monthly newsletter subscribers. So here I'm using that member of smart list filter, and that was the optional step. So if I didn't use the global smart list, I could also just pull in our opt-in monthly newsletter equals true. So either of these two options would work. But that's as simple as your audience should be, right? So if we're thinking opt-in, consent, making sure you're compliant, that's who your monthly newsletter should be going to, just the people that have opted in and not pulling in any other attributes. Back here. Step 7 was creating that overall parent newsletter. And then step 8 is that folder structure and that purple email program that I just showed there. Step 9 is the audience as well. So we'll make sure we have this recording and these slides. So wanted to make sure each one of these steps were documented for you. And then step 10 can get a little fun, right? So how are you going to promote your newsletter? And maybe you don't want to be directing people to your preference center, right? It should be the little link in the bottom of your footers where the global unsubscribe lives. And maybe we want a positive mindset form out on your website. So we want to create a form and a landing page, or maybe just the form to embed to your website where people can sign up for that monthly newsletter out on your site. And step 11 is an optional step that I'll show as well. So it's a smart campaign associated with that form fill, and it helps to stamp the acquisition program and the acquisition date when somebody fills out the form. So Marketo will do this automatically for you if the form is on a landing page nested within our monthly newsletter program. But if we embed that form to the website, it doesn't do that for you. So this is great for reporting, so we can track how did we acquire that lead's interest. So I'll show both of those things here. I'm still under monthly newsletter. And again, another benefit to that default program is I can contain all these other local assets in here rather than just having some purple email programs that we send out every month. So we've got our sign up form. It's very similar to the preference center. Pretty simple. We're just looking for an email address field and then the opt-in value. Little difference on this one. I did have the checkbox initially selected. So one less step for our users, one tiny little second closer to getting them to opt in. So kind of use your best judgment on when do you want to have things initially selected. And then we have our page here. Reapprove that, no changes really, but we'll take a look at this link. So then we just have a general sign up page where people can sign up. You'd probably want to make this a little bit fancier. And if you put it on your website, you have that embed code where you can drop the JavaScript on the website. Then our next piece was that acquisition program. So I'll go down to this smart campaign that I've built here to handle the monthly newsletter acquisition. And in the smart list, we're listening for whenever somebody fills out that opt-in form. Then in the flow step, I like to take a check and see if that acquisition program is empty, because we don't want to be overriding that value, then set it to our monthly newsletter program. And then same thing with acquisition date. So if it's empty, use your system tokens and say system.datetime, which will stamp the exact time that the end user fills out that form. Okay, so a couple notes about the opt-in. Sometimes clients get all overwhelmed about how do you handle the logic. And the great thing about the Marketo forms is the forms are going to handle that logic for you. You can get a little tricky, as I was showing, with the stored value on the checkboxes. So maybe you're switching it from yes to lapsed to blank. You can mess around with if your field is a positive mindset, right? We've got our opt-in to the monthly newsletter. You could have the stored value be more of a negative mindset if you wanted it to say unsubscribe from our monthly newsletter in your preference center. The other thing, kind of how I talked about cloning those purple email programs makes for good reporting. And then the visibility rules within the form makes for a good user experience when filling things out on that preference center, and good data integrity as well. Okay, before we get into the opt-out mindset, any questions on opt-in, preference centers, anything from the crowd? Awesome. We have a hand raised.
Hi, my question is, if we want the opt-ins to only appear for certain people, like based on like a whole smart list of criteria. Can you do that in the visibility rules?
I don't believe so. I had that question from a client today, actually, and what I proposed was doing dynamic content and having 2 different footer snippets with 2 different landing pages that have different experiences. It gets a little messy thinking about all the different use cases. This particular client only had one option. They were like, all right, we need to have experience 1 or experience 2 and flip between those 2. So we made a segmentation where monthly newsletter subscriber equaled true, and then they got that specific footer. Brandon, do you have any other thoughts with the form? If we could do different visibility on the landing page, maybe with some JavaScript?
So if you had some sort of customer type that you might be able to do that. So, like when you think visibility rules on a form, you think kind of, if country equals United States, I'm going to give these 50 states. I wonder if we might be able to do that if we had information about somebody's value. So maybe they're interested in product A or they're subscribed to newsletter A, but I think it'd have to be a field on the form to be able to dictate that.
So that all prerequisites that this is all on a Marketo landing page, because you need to be on a Marketo landing page in order to get information from Marketo to do any of this smart capability, right? So in order to use tokens or to generate information from Marketo. So to follow up on that, if you wanted to do it specifically on the form, it would probably have to be something within the cookie or within the UTM value where you're able to grab that information outside of Marketo and then apply that through your JavaScript. Inside of the email response with the footers, you could also do something with velocity scripting if you wanted to have that dynamic content without going through and making a segmentation or something like that. You could do some velocity scripting, which would hide and show certain information depending upon what information is available from Marketo.
That answer your question, hopefully.
Thanks.
And that was Chris Kelly. He is on our team here at Xeris. Thank you, Chris.
We have another question. Is it required to set up the flow for acquisition program and acquisition date? It is not by default in Marketo, or is it not in default by Marketo?
Right. So for our understanding, usually the Marketo form on the Marketo landing page will fill the acquisition program and the acquisition date for you if it lives underneath a program. So we can kind of go back to that. So here I've got my monthly newsletter program. I have a form and a landing page. So it should just do it automatically. But if we embedded this form using our embed code out to your external website, it is not going to do it. And so that's why we built that smart campaign.
Great, thanks.
Awesome. All right. Any other questions? Perfect. We'll go to opt-out mindset. So just another example we'll walk through. This one is for event emails. So you can see my verbiage is a little bit different as well. I go with the unsubscribe, similar to our global unsubscribe field. So we're unsubscribing from event emails. And then in step 2, you're adding that field to the preference center. So we kind of covered both of those steps already. You're just creating a new custom field, and then you need to make sure that it is included in anywhere that people can manage their communications. So then step 3, thought it would be fun to make a little mugs event program in Marketo. So we're going to build out one of those blue event programs, kind of walk through the structure, typical workflow, and how we would suppress anybody that has opted out of event emails. So in step 4 here, you can see I have different smart list filters. The first one is that unsubscribe from event emails field. And we need to ensure that that value is false for all the people we're going to send our first invite out to. And then using our advanced filters at the top, I'm targeting 3 different attributes here. So anyone where the state is kind of in the Midwest region, job title contains marketing director, or a valued industry. But it excludes anyone that has opted out. And I've got a little note here. We all kind of know Marketo is going to automatically block people that are globally unsubscribed or have invalid emails, even empty email addresses. It has that little blocked number on your programs, but we need to suppress our new category of opt-out. So I'll go back in Marketo and show that. If I go down here, we have our blue event program using the webinar channel. And we typically make our folder structure similar to this. So we have some local assets. I would probably have a registration form, probably make some operational email, use some creative content for our registration confirmation email, our invite email. And then down here, I have some different smart campaigns built out as well. So the first one is handling that registration logic. So we'll be listening for whenever somebody fills out the registration form, then in the flow step, we send them their registration confirmation email and we change their program status to registered. I like to have this as step 1 because you want to make sure your registration logic is sound before you start sending out any official invitations. So then in step 2, we see that suppression take place. So in our smart list, you can see what I had on the slides where we have unsubscribe from event emails needs to be false. And then any of the other options can occur for our target. And in the flow step, I sent out the invite and then change the program status to invited. So that's one use case with events. You could do it for a variety of other things, right? So maybe you are unsubscribing from marketing emails. It would be the exact same thing. You would say any marketing email that goes out, we need to have unsubscribe from marketing emails set to false, and then target the rest of the attributes that we're looking for. Okay. Then we have some optional and some advanced topics here near the end. So one of the additional options is nested granular opt-outs. So we've been working with some clients that want to reduce their opt-out rates. They had a high global unsubscribe rate. And you can see kind of in this example on the right-hand side, the users now have the ability to unsubscribe from all event emails, or they could unsubscribe from specific emails. So they have their innovation festival. They also have like webinars and some virtual events. And maybe we want to give the end users as much control as possible, right? Brandon kind of talked about control in the beginning. So with this granular opt-out, you can just keep expanding those different categories. And if we look at Marketo and pretend we had an additional category, we could say, for opt-in to the monthly newsletter, you would have 2 things here at the top. So we could say, all right, this is our all event emails are unsubscribed, and then an additional attribute. Maybe this is my webinar emails opt out. And I would say both of these things need to be false before I start targeting additional attributes and sending the invite out. So you just add additional layers of suppression the further you go. Okay. Any questions on opt-in and suppressions before we get into advanced topics? All right. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a quick one. You touched on it a little bit earlier about how you have the unsubscribe link, so the global unsubscribe as well as the preferences unsubscribe. Just wondering how you decide whether to have both or just one, or is it okay to just have the preferences page link and not have the one-click global unsubscribe?
Yes. So I'd say a majority of our clients have a preference center link and that's it in their footer. And that preference center contains all of the options as we see here. So it has that global unsubscribe checkbox and all the other options. With this kind of one-click unsubscribe, we're going to get into the benefit of having two is, people see unsubscribe here and they think, all right, I'm going to unsubscribe. And then that just kind of opts them out of one particular opt-out. It could opt them out of everything. It's kind of up to you, I guess, and your legal team. We see kind of most of our clients, they fluctuate kind of 50-50.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I think we have one more point. Liz wants to make a point.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're willing to go back to the form that you were just on, the example, can you speak on the logic of on the form itself of being able to do? Is that just hidden, like hiding your other if
Kind
that
of
just hiding it?
Yep. So the visibility rules,
Yeah.
Just enabling that. So I enabled it on the monthly newsletter, and I said, if global unsubscribe is true, hide this.
Okay.
And the greatest benefit there is you wouldn't want people opting into your monthly newsletter and globally unsubscribing at the same time. That just doesn't really make sense.
Hey, Georgia,
Hey,
do you mind if, go ahead.
Go ahead, Chris.
Do you mind go ahead and hitting that unsubscribe? One of the other benefits of doing this too is that other values should automatically deselect when you hide the value. It
Yes.
will allow some additional logic to be built in for you. So you don't have to worry about if people change their mind halfway through the form fill and like, no, I don't want to do this. I'm just going to unsubscribe from everything. And therefore you're also creating that, making sure that that logic is sound.
Exactly. Yeah, I kind of breezed over that. But data wise, you can see, I have subscribe checked and then I click unsubscribe. And if I unselect it, you can see it also unselected that field. So good data integrity there.
Liz just said you just answered her next question. So
Awesome.
Hey, George, point when you were talking about the unsubscribe process, whether you're unsubscribing to that category when you unsubscribe from, say, a newsletter or going to the preference center, I would just say be really clear about what you're doing. We had people in the past where somebody unsubscribed and they just unsubscribed from that category, but not necessarily, and they wanted to unsubscribe from everything. So just be really explicit on that page, both on what it says they're doing, and then on the confirmation afterwards, if you have a confirmation message that says, hey, you've been unsubscribed to the ABC newsletter, to manage all your preferences, go here, so you don't have people thinking that they unsubscribed when they didn't.
Exactly. That's a good point. Because mine's a little blended together. It's not clear because this says receive Xeris emails, unsubscribe here because I'm putting both of them together. So don't do this.
And it's true on forms that you can only do opt-in or opt-out fields.
Right. You can't. So Liz's question is, can you have a subscribe to monthly newsletter and unsubscribe to monthly newsletter on the same form? So no, you can only use that field once on the form. So you can't have like a section at the top for subscriptions and a section at the bottom for unsubscribed stuff because you can only use that one field uniquely one time.
we have Olga has her hand raised. If you want to ask a question.
Yes. Hi, everybody. My question is here, did I understand correctly that under unsubscribe here and manage your preferences here on your footer example that you're showing right now, we have a link to preference center, right?
Correct. Yeah. So in this use case, it's going to both places. It's kind of a blended example as I get into the one-click unsubscribe and how that can function.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry, I should have made two different footers. I got excited with my advanced topics.
Yeah, I love the idea that you can manage what type of unsubscription you have, like from event, but you still can get emails about newsletter, for example, like partial unsubscribing. Is it the logic here?
Exactly. Yep. So that way it reduces your overall global unsubscribe rate. Okay, I can go ahead and get into this so we can show how it functions. So some people have requested, rather than having our users fill out a form every time, we already know what their email address is. We sent them the email. We just want to let them one click unsubscribe. So in this example, the logic gets handled with the Smart campaign instead of the form. So I'll go into Marketo and we'll show up here in our Preference Center, we have a one-click unsubscribe. And for the one-click unsubscribe, you need a confirmation landing page that can live as the link within your footer. So we can take a look at that. And that's kind of the example you saw on the slide. So it says, sorry to see you go. You successfully unsubscribed from event emails. So in our example, when I'm clicking that unsubscribe here, kind of pretend this would say, if you no longer wish to receive Xeris event emails, unsubscribe here, that would take you to this page where you've granularly one click opted out of event emails only. And in our Smart campaign, then we're listening for a click in the email to that specific link. So our trigger is clicks link in email, any of our emails, but it is that specific one-click unsubscribe confirmation link. And then on that trigger, in the flow step, we say, change the data value of our unsubscribe from event emails to true. So now the logic's moved from the form to this Smart campaign. And I believe that was just kind of my next slide here too. So it's showing that trigger again, and then the flow step. And we set the schedule to run every time because there is a potential that maybe Bob Smith gets a marketing email and he goes to the Preference Center and he opts back in to those event emails. And then someday he needs to one click unsubscribe again. So you got to kind of think about the whole process and all those different use cases. So I set that schedule to every time. Okay, next topic is double opt-in. So this is a common use case as well. If you want to make sure you have super engaged people in your system, or maybe you are managing a database of 1 million records and you need to stay under that Adobe contract. That's usually a hot topic. And you want to make sure you have the most engaged people in the system. You could do a double opt-in. And so for that, on form fill to sign up for a newsletter, you can use the Smart campaign to fire an autoresponder email with a specific CTA link that then just kind of does the reverse of what we just did, essentially. So here I've got a Smart campaign, little screenshot. We're listening for if somebody fills out that monthly newsletter sign up form that we already previewed, then in the flow step up here at the top, we just send that autoresponder email out. And within that email, we say, thanks for signing up. Are you sure you want to receive the monthly newsletter? Super awesome. Click this link to confirm. And then we listen in a different Smart campaign for the user clicking that link. And then in the flow step, we say, change the data value of our monthly newsletter opt-in to true. So it adds a couple extra Smart campaigns, but it's manageable. So in Marketo, we can show down in our monthly newsletter program, again, we have the send double opt-in email Smart campaign that's walking through that logic. Again, we'd probably want that to function every time. So I could edit my schedule here to say every time, because I might fill out that form multiple times throughout my life. And then we would handle the double opt-in click with this Smart campaign. So if they click the link in the email, and we could say the email is specifically our autoresponder, we could also add a constraint and make sure that that link is the CTA link for confirmation. And then in the flow step, we set that newsletter value to true. All right. That is all I have for advanced topics. We'll open the floor to questions, or if anyone wants to kind of introduce yourself and talk about your use cases or has any ideas for future topics. This was the inaugural day of the Des Moines Marketo User Group, so we're open to other presenters in the future or other topics.
Yep. And if you are interested in co-sponsoring and leading a presentation with us in the future, just let me know and I would be happy to have a conversation about what we could do for a future session. We do have Liz. You have a question?
I do. So we use Marketo a little differently than I think a lot of people traditionally use it. And we kind of manage different projects for other clients. So our databases are very segmented. So when it comes to opt-in and opt-out pages on preference centers, we struggle with figuring out, like, how do we make sure they're getting the right opt-out or opt-in? Is that segmentation list by partition? Like, we have multiple partitions, and we actually have a different dedupe because of how complex our system is. We have to have intended partition as the secondary because we actually need duplicates. A lot of the people that are in the community that are interested in one project are also interested in a whole different project, and those lists need to be duplicative, if that makes sense.
So is the same person in multiple partitions?
Yes.
Okay, so what you'll need to do there is make sure that each time you're coming to the page
Mhm.
is you'll need to refresh your cookie. You'll need to get a brand new cookie coming in each time to make sure that when a person with the same email is coming across in one partition to the next, that they are in fact going to that exact form fill, and we know exactly which person it is, right, based off of the ID.
Okay.
So that is one thing that you'll need to look out for, making sure that Marketo understands exactly who you are and exactly where you are, because despite what you might think by the word partition, you cannot have a Chris Kelly at Xerox.com in multiple partitions because Marketo will still see that as a duplicate person, even though you might think that, hey, it's its own partition, it's by itself, it's segmented. No, it's not, unfortunately. So you'll need to make sure that when you're doing your submissions that you're grabbing both the email and your additional key value for your purposeful duplicate, and making sure that that information is going to the correct person record, right? So when you're filling out a form and things like that, you can go and check that person's data values, activity log, and make sure that that specific form submit was only for Chris Kelly 1 and not Chris Kelly 2, that type of thing.
So how do I force the cookie refresh?
So what you would need to do is there's some JavaScript that you can do that will essentially change the cookie value's expiration date to like 1995, and then that automatically kills the original cookie. And then on form submit, as part of the JavaScript for Marketo, it is to re-cookie someone. So that is why you would need to provide that email. Make sure that the email and the additional key is already grabbed. So let's call it person ID. So you have the email and the person ID inside of the form, and then you can blank the cookie and then have the submission happen. And that will make sure that that new cookie value is going specifically for the person ID plus email, and that allows for the understanding between the different segmentations and different partitions, right?
Okay.
Yeah, that one's a very complicated use case. I agree.
Yeah. I run into it a lot of times.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Hey, Chris, would it be helpful talking about something like Ensemble IQ, where if you guys didn't want to use partitions, maybe you could use like fields for different brands within there? Do you think that's a use case that'd be worth talking through a little bit?
Sure, absolutely. Is everybody happy to hear through that? Otherwise, I'm happy to release the floor and tell.
I just go over like a high level, kind of what the example is, how you're using it, because that's a common use case anytime there's multiple brands within a user. So yeah, maybe just talk through like 2 minutes, like kind of what we're doing and how we're doing and what the use case is.
Sure. So for many of our clients, we have they have multiple brands that they would like to have a subscription center for each one. So how we're getting around that is we're not using any segmentations, partitions. We're not doing any unique workspaces. How we're enabling this is we're just having a lot of custom fields on the person record. So for brand A, I have an entire form fill for brand A. And then I have the same fields, but brand B, right? So it would be brand A first name, brand A mobile, brand B country, things like that. So I'm specifying how that's going to be unique in each case. And the one person can be applied to multiple brands. So if Chris Kelly signs up for brand A and brand B, the only thing that would change would be his like brand A company is filled out. Brand B company would have a different one, that type of thing. So we're not overwriting the same given field. We're just allowing for literally different forms to be created with brand specific fields, because you're only allowed to have that field, like Georgia had said, available one time on a form. So you can do kind of some mix and match where you can utilize the system fields like first name or email, last name, that type of thing, and then also have your brand specific fields underneath.
Awesome. Any other questions? All right. Well, I will conclude with thank you for your time today. If you have not already joined the if you have not joined the Des Moines Marketo User Group, please do for any future sessions you would like to join. I will send an email with the recording. It'll also be on the YouTube channel for mugs. And then we hope to see you at our next session. Thank you, everybody, for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Georgia.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.